So you want to make an airspace video, huh, James? Well, that's pretty cool. It's admirable. It's a pretty deep topic, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. We're live. So Todd, when you're out there paramotoring, I'm sure you've run across spectators that come up to ask questions afterwards.
Particularly in South Carolina, not so much in Florida because these guys are pervasive down here, and there's lots of paramotors, and it's not unique to see guys flying paramotors, especially in Central Florida. They're everywhere. But yeah, I've been there. I've stopped traffic in South Carolina unintentionally.
So one of the biggest questions I always get is how high can you fly that thing? That's like the number. If it's not that, then it's how fast can you go? Those are like the top two I get.
Neither of which makes a hell beans difference. That's not why we do this.
Exactly. But it is why some people choose to do this, right? Setting an altitude PR is something many pilots go for. You know, it's a goal to hit is their new altitude record.
Yeah.
And most of the YouTube stars, I'm talking Kyle O'Glee, Tucker, Mark, they've all done high altitude videos. So I figured, what if I wanted to do a high altitude video? How would I go about doing that safely? How would I plan for that?
I get it.
So before I became a paramotor pilot, or before I even knew about paramotors, I was still a flight geek. I'm sure like most paramotor pilots are. And the way I got my fix was through simulators, right? That's how the poor man flies, is he pretends he's flying, I guess. So
don't knock it. I know a kid that I helped him get his commercial and instrument pilot's license, and he was very good at what he did because he spent so much time on his VAC sim.
Yes.
He knew the vernacular, and
yes.
he's a natural because of it.
And that's how I cut my baby teeth as far as any knowledge of IFR flight plans. I practiced and learned on VATSIM. I used to be part of the LA Center. Each center actually trains their pilots and their controllers, and it's not uncommon to be requesting clearance from a guy who comes back and sounds like 12 years old, because he probably is 12 years old.
Yeah, or he's a janitor at night, or a janitor by day and an air traffic controller at night on VATSIM.
Yeah, exactly. So getting that quick peek behind the curtain into IFR led me to think like, well, there are some general things that I could do to increase the odds that I'm not going to run into traffic at, flight level 180 or whatever, sure. 1,800 feet, right? Or 18,000 feet. So I thought maybe we could discuss that, because I did mention this to you before we set up this webcam, and you told me basically, James, it's no guarantee and it's not that simple. Can you explain that? Can you explain why you can't rely on a pilot to follow the star from beginning to end?
Oh man, there's lots of reasons, and I had sent you some of those. The 4 clips that I already shared with you talk specifically about some of these, but there's a lot of good reasons. One of them is weather. You especially if you have paying passengers on board the airplane, they don't like riding through weather, and it might be as simple as one 15,000-foot cumulus cloud that only fits over about 3 acres. If you go flying through that thing, somebody may get hurt. So right then and there, you may step off of the arrival and deviate around that. Expediency. I was always the guy that wanted to minimize my time in the air flying the airline. I wanted A to B, straight line, short distance. I wanted to keep my speed up to the absolute last minute. Minimum power. The real trick for the airline was close the throttles at the top of descent and land on the runway with only spooling the motors up at the absolute minimum that's in the flight manual. And then that's it. No additional power. If you add power prior to that, it means you started the descent too soon, or your geometry to get to the runway was wrong.
So spot landing from
Plus
100 miles out.
From flight level 370.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And there's lots of ways to manage the energy that we don't have in paragliders that you have in a commercial aircraft, of course, because the requirements to stay on these published standard terminal arrival routes and standard instrument departure procedures are pretty stringent. And now, like just the last 8 or 9 years, they've added this additional vertical requirement that never really used to be part of the departures. And it's to make room, so like maybe 30 miles to the west of the airport where there's a tendency for the departure traffic to conflict with the arrival traffic when it's busy. Just pick an airport on the East Coast. Now, it used to be they separated everything laterally. Well, now they separate things laterally and vertically so that they can use 9 corridors where they used to have.
Sure. Well, Todd, real quick, let me see if I can't pull up a star just so that people who may not know what a star looks like can check it out. I'm going to share this screen here.
All right.
My entire
now,
screen.
STAR is the standard terminal arrival route is the acronym for STAR.
Yeah.
And they are to get the jet traffic from high altitudes where they're pretty much maybe going direct, maybe even as far across the country as possible, to where they start being metered into a plan for arrivals. And this really gets complex. Especially if you're flying around busy airports. Now, you and I are familiar with the Columbia Airport. We got a lot of departures and arrivals over there from the Atlanta area and the Charlotte areas. So we kind of expect most of the commercial traffic to be coming from those two directions, north and west. But when you got a big international airport, and I wouldn't imagine anybody has too much of an opportunity to fly a paraglider in too close to those Class Bravo controlled airspaces, but if you did, you might take a look at the stars, especially if you knew that there was a specific time of day when there was a lot of arrivals from a given direction. And you could find that out by watching Flight Radar 24.
Okay, well, let me step back just a couple seconds to say that commercial airliners are qualified to fly instrument flight, which means that they're going to fly through bad weather and through clouds, and they do that using their instruments. So they have what they call instrument approach procedures or instrument procedures. The STAR and the departure procedure being an example of those. So if we were to pick STAR or DP to talk about, they're pretty much going to be the same. It's neither here nor there as far as what you're going to see on the plate, right?
Right.
The same symbols, the same path, or not the same path, but the same representation of a path through those. So I'm just going to pick one here, just to run people through how they could even see where these are at. So I'm at airnav.com/airport, and then I'm at LAX. Is there an airport that you would like to discuss, Todd, that you're more familiar with?
Not in particular. I mean, you pick any of these big airports, I'm probably intimately familiar with them. Yeah, the LAX one is pretty standard there for departing out of LA, especially for domestic flights going eastbound.
So we'll just pull that up so we can look at it. And could you please basically explain this? These are routes that people are going to take out of LAX, basically.
Yeah, and you're going to get a clearance. This is typically what they're going to assign you if you're using the runways headed to the west. So you're going to come off the departure runway, whichever one they decide to assign you. And a lot of that is based on which gate you were parked at, because they try to keep the taxi distances as minimal as possible. And you can see at the very top of the chart there, it says take off from all of those runways. The minimums are in the second page, but we don't need to talk about the minimums. That's for low weather. And they expect you to fly to 3,000 feet and cross that Santa Monica radial, that VOR radial there at 160 degrees. And then once you're across that, if you were to lose radial contact, they would expect you to turn back. But this is a radar departure. They're radar vectoring guys, and usually the typical turn is after they get out over the ocean there, because right away you go feet wet over the ocean.
Right.
they turn you right back towards the LAX VOR, and they want you to come back overhead the airport. And then that's where you join whichever one of these transitions. So the transitions are the far ends of these things. It's like you can see on the far right-hand side of the chart, there's thermal. So they may tell you that you're going to fly overhead Seal Beach in the thermal transition.
Okay.
Well, obviously you're not going to turn down towards Oceanside or Mission Bay if that's what you're doing. So,
Right. And so let's take a look. How far is thermal going to be from LAX airport? It's going to be way outside of their airspace, right?
Yeah, it's a significant distance, and that's why if you notice there, the altitude, the underlying altitude is 11,000 feet on that thing. So these guys are going to be at 11,000 feet between Pomona or between the intersection there is called Tuskegee, between Tuskegee and Thermal.
That's my point, is that, hey, if I'm making a high altitude run, I'm going to be at 11,000 feet too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So is there any way to know, all three of these are active based on where the plane's headed for its final destination?
Very, very exacting.
Okay.
So eastbound, they're going to be going over Thermal. If somebody's going down to San Diego or down into Mexico, they're probably going to be heading over Mission Bay. And if they're heading out offshore, maybe to go to Hawaii, although this isn't typically the departure that they would give you out of LA to go to Hawaii, if for some reason there was weather that they were moving all of the westbound traffic south of, they'd have you all the way down there on the left-hand side over Rosin.
Right.
But you know what this chart does not show, James?
Yes, sir.
This is just the nav aids. There are other departures that may be based strictly on GPS coordinates or names of intersections that are not a direct overlay to this.
Well, let's just take a look at where thermal's at, just so that we can see. And you can go to SkyVector here and should be able to just type in the letters, right, Todd?
I believe so.
Yeah.
It should take you in there and you can zoom in on
So
it.
here we go. We are, just to go again, right here. TRM happens to be Cochrane Regional Airport, VOR and everything else. So I know that if I'm flying right here, that anywhere near Cochrane Regional Airport, I wouldn't want to be between Cochrane and whatever the previous waypoint was. So Cochrane and Hemet, I could put that in too, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
To see that leg, Hemet.
So that's just north of Salton Sea where they just have the big flying. And you can see now some of those IFR fixes are actually on these VFR charts. In fact, right there, when you just type that in, Hemet shows up there.
Right.
So that is where Hemet intersection is. So you can correlate where these intersections on the departures are with exactly where you're at on a VFR map, which you can actually now look at in reference to something. You can say, oh, I know where that's at. That's just southeast of the Hemet Airport.
Exactly. So, and what I'm getting at here is that if I'm planning on flying somewhere right here, I'm going to be staying away from 11,000 feet here at Lake Hemet, because that's right along that path and a possible path for IFR traffic.
Particularly heavy jet traffic, yeah. And if you're going for an altitude run, you can see now, I just take a general look at this whole chart that you're displaying, the visual chart, and you can see all those blue Victor Airway routes. Now, the jets are going to transition off the Victor Airways to the jet route structure, which is the high altitude charts,
yes,
as soon as possible.
Right.
And a lot of times, they'll only make a departure or an arrival fly a portion of the departure or arrival. And as soon as there's a clearing in the airspace, they'll turn them loose to their first high altitude fix and pretty much delete the rest of the departure procedure or dump somebody onto the arrival procedure, not necessarily at the first point where they could have. That makes sense.
Absolutely. So at what level does the high altitude stuff start?
18,000 feet.
Okay.
The transition level in most countries, it happens to be 18,000 feet MSL in the United States. In some of the foreign countries, it tends to be significantly lower, but above the transition level. So what's the transition level? It's where the airplane stops referencing the local altimeter settings and sets their altimeter to a preset setting of 2992 inches of mercury. So now they're all flying pressure waves relative to each other, and that eliminates the need to get a current altimeter setting. So you can fly through big weather systems without having to worry about running into other airplanes because they've got a different altimeter setting.
Right, because where you're truly at above the ground matters less than where you're at compared to other traffic.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's rewind just a bit regarding this high altitude run. I'm planning my high altitude run, but it's really not the law that's my deterrent. It's not my obstacle to overcome, right? 18,000 feet, I haven't yet to see a YouTuber go to 18,000 feet because of basically technical difficulties, right? Technical concerns, health concerns. What have we seen? We've seen like 15,000-ish.
I think both Tucker and Mark Honeycutt went to 15,000 feet. I think Kyle Glee got up there using oxygen,
which was really cool. But this is not a pissing contest, but anything over 12.5 is going to require supplemental oxygen. How does that work? That's only that's not FAR 103.
That's a real good question because when we talk about the regulatory side of it, you're really talking about Part 91, which we're not held to the standard of. For me personally, at nighttime, I would go on oxygen 100% anytime I was above 10,000 feet.
Why does nighttime make a difference?
Oh, all kinds of flight physiology reasons. Your visual acuity decreases at nighttime. In commercial aircraft and even a lot of private aircraft to get up there, you're in a pressurized cabin. So what we're really talking about here is cabin altitude, not the altitude outside. But in a paramotor, we don't have any way to pressurize our cabin because we don't have one.
Sure.
You are at whatever the pressure altitude is,
right,
where your body's hanging under that wing. So, all kinds of flight physiology things start to happen as you lose oxygen saturation in your blood. You can become hypoxic. You can have a significant decrease in your night visual acuity capability.
I see.
And it's mandated, anytime above a cabin altitude of 10,000 feet, airline crews have to be on oxygen. And at the higher altitudes, even with a pressure cabin, if one guy gets up to leave go to the bathroom or whatever, the other guy is required to put on his mask just in case.
Wow.
Because the higher you get, the lower your reaction time is to recognize hypoxia and bad events. So you might have something as benign as the cabins start climbing, and it may set the alarm off. If it happens slow enough, the standard thinking is that you will not have a sense of urgency to do anything about that because you'll already be experiencing the onset of hypoxia.
Right. It'll be all good, man.
Yep, hypoxia, everything's fine until you just pass out, and then now you're along for the ride, right?
Exactly. Had to shut my window and neighbors started making noise. So then the health concerns over making a high altitude run, obviously the lack of oxygen is going to be an issue. One of the things, I like flying low. Like one of the reasons why I haven't done a high altitude PR is because it really doesn't interest me.
Right.
Because when you get up high, you don't feel like you're moving much at all, unless you're Mark Honeycutt flying 100 miles an hour with those high altitude winds. But it feels like you're just sitting still, so that it's no fun there. But I also feel like the ground is safer. And they say when you have a mid-air emergency that the altitude's your friend. But my backwards thinking is that, hey, I can get on the ground sooner if I'm lower. And so it doesn't interest me. How high have you been above ground?
Today was my personal record.
Oh, really?
Yep, I went over there to Valkyria, and I made the crossing over the swamp at about 3,400 feet. So that's the absolute highest above ground level I've been in one.
And that was enough for me. Not saying I wouldn't go up high, but Tucker's 15,000 foot video was how I even found out about paramotoring and what got me into it. Like, wow, he mentions in that video, hey, I can see Philadelphia and I can see New York, and I'm thinking like, wow, that is crazy because I can't see anything but his kneecaps in those cities.
Yeah, and when I went on glide this morning, you know, I was worried about the motor loading up because that's the longest I've ever run at an idle was to glide down from 32 or 3,300 feet down to the surface level at the Valkyrie Airport.
Very cool. So that's about as much as you feel you need at this point?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I mean,
Yeah.
out west it's a different story. And out west I would have a tendency to be more of a free flight guy anyways, just because I'd never get that opportunity on the East Coast. So, you know, out there I'd take more interest in the whole concern about oxygen. If I ever happen to, you know, get that day where you got the real good thermal lift and all of a sudden you're at 11,000 feet and you say, well, the weather's supposed to be like this tomorrow and come back again. Well, now I'm going to be thinking about going out and buying an supplemental oxygen system.
So some of the other things with regard to planning your high altitude run, some of the other things to know about the way traffic works, the altitude thing. Let's say you're doing a cross country. Let's say you're not going for a high altitude run, but you're doing a cross country and you want to avoid traffic. There are altitudes, odds and even altitudes, that is a general rule that if you're flying north or east, you're going to fly at an odd altitude versus south or west, you're going to fly at an even altitude. A good thing to take into account when you're making a cross-country run? Or
yeah, absolutely, especially if it's a nice weather day in VFR weather. Now the VFR traffic is going to add 500 feet to that.
Yes,
so if they're going westbound and they have the ground clearance to do so, they're going to be at 4,500, 6,500, 8,500, and the eastbound traffic will be at the odd numbers plus 500. So
yes. But at least those 500s are looking out at you, right? So looking out for
they
you.
They should be looking out at
yes.
you, yeah. Well, you know, everybody below 18,000 feet, there is the requirement for everybody to see and avoid. But I know from personal experience, you know, above 10,000 feet, the lights come off, the seat goes back, and you start thinking about what's on the menu for launch.
Yes, with the other consideration, 10,000 feet being speed limits reduced or taken away, right? Under 10,000 to 250.
So there's always when you cross through 10,000 feet, all of the airplanes that are in the current commercial airliner fleet fly significantly better. They climb better at about 280, 290, 300 knots. So as soon as they get out of 10,000 feet, they're going to push that nose over. They're going to hang right there at 10,000 feet until they get to 280, 290, and then that's going to be their economical best climb. The heavier the airplane is, the faster that speed is. It can go all the way up to 340 knots or so on a big Aerojet.
So then that's another altitude to avoid is 10,000 feet because
10,000
everybody's
feet
leveling out.
To avoid because that's where those guys are going to be cutting their climb rate in at least half and getting to that faster speed as soon as they can for the sake of efficiency.
Very good, very good. In that sectional, you saw the light blue shaded airways, right? Not jetways, right? Jetways is completely different. You got me on that one. So, is there any other airways that aren't illustrated by those blue lines on the sectional?
Yeah.
Okay.
And especially with the advent of GPS waypoints. See, here's the thing, what GPS gave the pilot was the ability to navigate to any point. So as GPS came out of the box, initially there was all these complicated procedures, and we kept thinking and kept hearing at some point we're going to see this point-to-point direct navigation. In other words, you could take off from Santa Monica and fly all the way to Philadelphia International Airport and be on one heading the same for the entire flight. Well,
yes.
It never really quite happened that way.
Okay.
We came close, so what has happened now is the ability to navigate those long Great Circle Route distances. You know what a Great Circle Route is? Do we need to talk about that?
It arcs through the curvature of the Earth or something?
Yes, it does.
Instead of a straight line on a map.
So if you were going to plot to fly along the 40th parallel, it's not going to get you from 80 west to 120 west the quickest by staying on that parallel.
Okay.
The quickest route actually goes up and over that because the plane of the airplane goes through the center of the Earth. The plane of your flight path goes through the center of the Earth. So GPS enables that. And you can't plan for that without radar. You can't plot that we know that this airplane is going to not hit that airplane because neither one of them are on a defined route. So the days of the defined routes are waning.
Yes, but
where they come into play is around the airports, because there they got to keep everybody on the grease pencil marks on the screen.
I see. And at what altitudes could you be on an arc versus a jetway or airway?
Depends on population density and airplane density. On the East Coast, not very often. On the West Coast, pretty soon out of 3,000 or 4,000 feet, they may cut you loose and say, "No traffic tonight. You're cleared all the way to the destination airport."
Wow,
2,500 miles away.
That's crazy. One last thing. When we were out at the private airport there, White Plains, and a buddy of yours who was air traffic controller mentioned there was a jet flying over, and he said, "Oh yeah, he's already got him at I forget what it was, 1,800 feet or 2,000 feet." And I asked, "How does he know that it's 1,800 feet or 2,000 feet?" And he mentioned, "Well, that's the base. That's how far we bring them down before they're cleared to land or whatnot." Can you explain that more? Because I didn't do a very good job.
In that situation, what Mike was that fellow's name, and I remember the conversation. He was talking about the minimum vectoring floor for arrivals to the airport that guy was going to. And what it really comes down to, James, is the limitations of the radar's capability. Okay, so there's a radar dish. You've driven by it out there by the airport. It's constantly spinning.
Okay.
They have one that's for ground movement of airplanes. They have another one that's for air movement of airplanes. And when you get 13, 14 miles away from the airport, it can't pick stuff up down low because of all the clutter, all the ground clutter. So airplanes get lost in the ground clutter and they can't see them. So they by design, they tilt that radar up to where they eliminate the ground clutter, and now it picks up the airplane cleanly.
I see.
They're going to get a good data sweep on that airplane. And it varies from airport to airport as to where the vectoring floors are. And it's just one of those things where, you know, if you flew both in the environment of PPG and in the cockpit of an airplane on flight plans, you would learn, oh yeah, every time I come in here, they step me down to 2,400 feet, but they won't let me go any lower. And you may ask them, or you just may make the assumption that what's happening here is you're hitting the vectoring floor, even if you wanted to go lower.
And so what you're getting at is that that's not published on any of these plates. You're not going to see this on a departure procedure, arrival procedure. You're not
unfortunately, no. Where you're gonna see that's a local tower management thing or approach control management issue.
Yes.
And there's so many things that affect that. You know, it could be that there's a little old lady's house and she's constantly complaining about airplane noise, and to appease her,
they add 1,000.
They attempt to move, or they add 1,000 feet on the departures, or they. You ever step outside and hear that noise of flaps extending on a heavy airplane?
I'm not that close to the airport. I was on the carrier.
You're at the distance from the airport where it would be most noticeable.
Really?
You'll hear it coming over, and when they stick the flaps on and slats out, it makes a real loud squealing and a loud pneumatic noise.
I'll pay more attention.
Yeah, and you'll hear that. Well, a lot of times people complain about that noise, and that noise can be controlled by where the speed reduction points are published on those arrivals. So sometimes they'll publish a revision to these arrivals in response to public complaints about airplane noise.
Sure.
So, you know, so that you know, or so that everybody knows, is these charts, system-wide, approach plates, arrival procedures, departure procedures, the en route charts, our sectional charts, they are updated on a 28-day cycle so that everybody's dealing from the same deck of cards.
Okay.
So, yes, there might be changes that are going to impact the way these guys operate, but they don't publish them all until they hit that 28-day cycle so that everybody's dealing with the same current data.
Sure.
Unless it's a safety of flight issue, then they'll issue NOTAMs, and you'll have to. It will be, you know, flight-specific planning for that stuff.
So what you're saying is just like paramotor pilots dealing with complainers or people that want to hate on what you're doing, the commercial airlines are feeling the same heat and
I've got so many stories.
Making adjustments to their behavior.
I mean, you can edit this out, but let me tell you, if you find any of this fun for the video, that's fine. I'm sitting at the gate in somewhere in the UK, and I don't specifically remember which airport it was. I want to say it was in Scotland somewhere, and for some reason I think it was either Gatwick or it may have been Manchester, England. We're sitting there. It's always cold and rainy, and it's hot in the airplane. I don't mean a little hot. I mean it's 90 degrees in the cabin. If you stand up and you're tall, your head goes up into that area between the area where you store the suitcases on both sides of the overhead bins, and it's 105 degrees, and their air conditioning system ain't catching up.
Okay.
So they had a prohibition in their documents for operating on the airport that said no APU usage until 15 minutes prior to departure. APU is an auxiliary power unit. It's a screaming, loud, noisy, sideways jet engine, and it's only got a function of making electricity and making the air from the net.
The average person would know the difference between if they were looking at that turbine versus a jet engine turbine.
Right.
It's pretty much the same thing.
And they're hidden. They're not cowled like the engine. They're inside the airplane.
You just see the tailpipe coming out the back.
Yeah, that's so we can make our own power. So I reach over and I turn on the APU. Enough is enough. We have the ability to cool the airplane down and make our customers happy. It was my mandate under our operating specs to keep the customers happy. There were safety concerns with boarding an airplane that's too hot. You got people in their 80s and 90s. You're going to make them walk down this aisle carrying their bags at 100 degrees.
Yes.
I turn around, and in the back of the cockpit door, there's this guy standing there in his yellow, typical English enforcement.
Yellow jacket.
Yeah, yellow jacket with the clipboard. And I'm thinking, hey, how's it going? And these guys are all over the airport. You know, they take fuel orders. They brief pilots on unusual activity. They make sure the ramp is safe. And he says, hey, Captain, I noticed you were running your APU. Yeah, and now I know this is going south, right? So I said, yeah, well, we are. It was pretty darn hot in the airplane. It's maybe 22 or 25 minutes to departure. And he writes down on the clipboard and snaps off a $10,000 fine and hands it to me like a parking ticket. And I'm thinking, you know, I don't know that the revenue margin on this segment is back to the Newark Airport is $10,000.
Right.
I don't know how this is going to end, but you know, I got to go on what my company expects me to do. So I took it back to the chief pilot's office when I got there. My supervisor at the time said this happened, and he hit the roof, and he wasn't mad at me because I did everything as per our procedures. He was mad at the fact that our procedures conflicted with their concept of noise and their concept of carbon footprint and their concept of energy usage. Even though it was inadequate, we're trying to do the right thing in this case.
This had to have been at the, now you're still qualified, but towards the most latest of your piloting, right?
And
the world was not like that.
I still have my licenses, but you know, I'm getting to the point now where I'm starting to, when I have talked with buddies and they want to talk specifics about procedures, some of it's a little fuzzy because you know you're so immersed in it on a day-in day-out basis that it was easy to let go of an awful lot of that stuff.
Absolutely. So no plans to return as far as you
I
said
don't
today.
think I physically can.
But you do still hold the ATP rating or whatever?
I still hold the ATP rating, and for what it's worth, I keep my flight instructor's rating current. I've done 2 firsts. They're called flight instructor refresher courses. I've done 2 of those now since I've been out.
But wait, I heard on the internet that you got your pilot's license from a dumpster behind a Wendy's. Is that true?
It is true, yeah. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Todd, I think that was some cool information. I think that was a cool exchange. A few tips on how you can plan a high-altitude run and give yourself the best chance at avoiding an incident with any other traffic.
Yeah, it's hardly a comprehensive course because
Right.
it's such a difficult subject. And it's a moving target because as nav systems change, as technology is implemented, as some of the older regulations are finally phased out, it changes the face of how particularly commercial traffic moves from airport to airport.
It's very cool. There's no guarantees. There's a few things you can do to help yourself out, but all in all, it's still a little bit of a risk, but so is flying in general, correct? I mean,
Absolutely.
so is walking out your front door.
So head on a swivel and try to stay out of the heavily trafficked areas if
Right.
you can.
Takes two to collide, right?
Yep.
That's cool. All right, that's it, YouTube. A couple of things you can do to kind of help yourself beat the odds up there. 15,000 feet, 18,000 feet. Do you dare? I don't think I'm gonna make a high altitude run. I don't have that kind of hours logged in the books that I feel like that's the next challenge that I should tackle. You heard it from Yankee himself. He's comfortable with just a few thousand feet. Any more than that, and you really aren't flying the right vehicle. Todd did something very special and documented his training, his self-training into paramotoring, teaching himself how to fly a paramotor. So that's something really cool that you can go check out on his channel. Otherwise, I appreciate you liking this video. I appreciate your subscription to my channel. So again, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.